Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm learning so much. I'm kind of rewriting my paper as we go along. And just picking up from Gabriel's fascinating discussion about Novalis, it reminded me of what I think is one of the most fantastic aphorisms by Nietzsche: how one ought to turn to stone, slowly, slowly, to become hard, like a precious stone, and at last to lie there, silent and a joy to the eternal. It's just absolutely fantastic. But on with the business at hand. And in the proemium to the interpretation of dreams, Freud gives us a quotation from Virgil, which could be read as, well, is it a promise or a threat? Flecteri si nequeo superos Acheron movebo. Translated in various ways as, well, perhaps most literally, if I cannot deflect the superior powers, then I shall move the river Acheron. But more commonly, if I cannot bend the heavens, then I shall move the powers of hell. The source, of course, being the Aeneid, book 7, line 321, words spoken by Juno. But this whole idea of the descent, of course, the katabasis that we have been referencing, also has a Virgilian source that Freud would have well known about. In book 6, rather than conjuring up the spirits of the dead through sacrifice, Aeneas descends to the underworld and goes to Lethe to meet the spirit of his father, beginning with a journey to Diphobe, the Sibyl of Cumae, asking for her assistance in the journey. This, of course, is the motif of the golden bough, which Aeneas is told he must obtain and present to the queen of Pluto and in the underworld. It's also, of course, the source of the great anthropological study, The Golden Bough, by the Glasgow-born scholar James George Fraser. Just giving a little plug there to the local boy. But of course, it's not just Virgil that could have been a source for Freud. Freud wouldn't have had to look any further than that of his colleague and disciple, C.G. Jung. For in his Black Books and the Red Book, which we already mentioned, Jung described his own katabasis as he experienced it on the 12th of December 1913. These visions, experiences, dialogues were described in retrospect by Jung as primal stuff, Urstoff, as incandescent matter, as the prima materia for a lifetime's work. But interestingly, in the original German text of his autobiographical study Memories, Dreams, Reflections, in the German version, Erinnerung und Träume, Gedanken, in a passage which doesn't appear in the English version, Jung relates how in 1910 he'd gone on a sailing tour with his friends Albert Oehry and Andreas Fischer from Zurich to Wallenstadt and back, during which Oehry had read aloud, in the iconic translation by Johann Heinrich Voss, from Book 11 of the Odyssey, with its account of the story of Circe and Odia's Nekia, which Jung suggested seemed to have anticipated his own descent into dark Hades, den Abstieg in den finsteren Hades. And it's a shame that this passage is excised from the English version. It goes a lot into the politics of how Jung has been presented, I think. Because what Jung does is to transpose this Homeric vision to his own native Switzerland, describing how, quote, a shimmer lay over the glinting lake and the banks shrouded in silvery mists. And in a note in the German edition, Agnele Jaffe recalls the strong excitement that Jung underwent, still reverberating when he tells of these matters, adding that Jung had proposed as the epigraph for the chapter about his confrontation with the unconscious, this quotation from the Odyssey, happily escaped from death. Now, in the Red Book, we find chapter 5 of Liber Primus, a chapter called Descent into Hell in the Future. And lots of resonances there, I think, with Hamann, with other sources. Everything in Jung, I think, is vibrating with German culture in various ways. But the title of the chapter reminds us of the experiential, the crucius experiential, as well as conceptual dimension to Jung's work in the Red Book. And it's interesting in this regard to note that in 1917, when Jung was serving as a commandant of the medical corps for a camp of interned British soldiers at Château d'Eu in the canton of Vaud, he writes a letter to Emma Jung relating how 3 days earlier he'd gone on a glorious day hiking up the Pointe de Cré. And on the summit of this mountain, he'd said he had a wonderful, ecstatic feeling, which he explicitly describes in terms of the transfiguration undergone by Christ on Mount Tabor. Last evening, says Jung, I had a most remarkable mystical experience, a feeling of connection of many millennia. It was like a transfiguration. Today, I'm probably going down to hell again for this. Which prompts us to ask, just how many descents into hell did Jung make? And in the case of this chapter in Liber Primus, the descent into hell is also a journey into the future, and hence is ascribed a prophetic dimension. In the Red Book, after his long sojourn in the desert of his own self, Jung is now ready for something to happen to him, something which happens when the spirit of the depths opens his eyes and he catches a glimpse of the inner things, the world of the soul, the many-formed and changing, die vielgestaltige und wandelbare. And this glimpse is preceded by a voice calling out, I'm falling, to which other voices respond by, where? What do you want? And Jung makes the decision to fall as well, as he puts it in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, dann ließ ich mich fallen, I let myself fall. An interesting mixture of decision and not decision, giving up a decision. Jung finds himself, when he falls, in a dark cave, the entrance to which is guarded by a leather-clad dwarf, one of the little people, I think, that we constantly encounter in legends of various kinds, dwarves, gnomes, elves, and so on and so forth. And his account of the descent to the depths, described as a threatening scene, shares many of the elements of the classical katabasis, such as Plutarch's description of the descent into the oracular crypt of Trophonius undertaken by Timarchus. This account is one of an experience of profound darkness, lying there unaware of whether one is awake or dreaming, and then hearing a crash and being struck on the head, thereby releasing his soul. Now, Timarchus sees islands illuminated by one colour, now another. Overhead he hears the whir of something revolving, the music of the spheres, either painfully loud or pleasingly smooth. And although he enjoyed the sight of the islands rotating, moving forwards and back again, he then looked into a great abyss, full of a terrible darkness, and from which could be heard innumerable roars and groans of animals, the wailing of innumerable babes, the mingled lamentations of men and women, and noise and uproar of every kind, coming faintly from far down in the depths, all of which startled him not a little, as I think one might accept. Other accounts also bear this out. Pausanias, talking about the descent to Trophonius, here it begins with drinking the waters of memory, to ensure one didn't forget what one was going to experience. It was, Pausanias noted, essential to take honey cakes with one, in order to appease the many serpents one encounters during the journey. Once in the cave, one sees nightmarish visions and heard terrifying voices until one was ready to leave. On the return to the surface, relatives carry away the body of the inquirer, paralyzed with terror and unconscious of both himself and his surroundings, until he's recovered all his faculties. And Pausanias notes, and the power to laugh will return to him. Well, I'd hope it would, after all of that. And what I find interesting is that what Jung experiences has numerous points of affinity with these and other accounts of katabasis or incubatio, incubation, which we've touched upon. Jung talks about crawling through a narrow crack in the rock, reaching an inner cave, in which is, he says, full of the frightful noise of shrieking voices. And in this vision, or dream, or experience, or fantasy, however one describes it, it all culminates with the sight of a red sun radiating throughout the dark water. Serpents strive towards it, hundreds and thousands of serpents veiling the sun. It turns dark. Deep night overcomes the scene, and a red stream of thick red blood springs up. Jung says, again, not surprisingly, he was seized by fear, and he asks himself, what did I see? Indeed, what was he really seeing there? And I think that what we're getting here is a visual transposition of a whole nexus of emotions that Jung is experiencing, or says he's experiencing, and we might want to return to this in discussion. He sees it as revealing something fundamental about the world. And Jung says in the Red Book, who can withstand fear when the divine intoxication and madness comes to them? Love, soul, and God are beautiful and terrible. The ancients brought over some of the beauty of God into this world, and the world became so beautiful that it appeared to the spirit of time to be fulfillment and better than the bosom of the Godhead. The frightness and cruelty of the world lay under wraps and in the depths of our hearts. If the spirit of the depths seizes you, you will feel the cruelty and cry out in torment. The spirit of the depths is pregnant with ice, fire, and death. You are right to fear the spirit of the depths, as he is full of horror. And in the way this is going back, I think, to a question posed in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzifal, where the young Parzifal asks, O weh Mutter, was ist Gott? Mother, tell me, what is God? And God is, like love and soul, beautiful and terrible, schön und furchtbar. And this beauty and this terribleness are evident in Jung's vision and the one that will follow it. There, in the red light of the crystal, shines blood, and Jung discovers that its secret is a cause of horror, das Schreckliche, the horror which Rilke says is the beginning of beauty as well. There is a quotation attributed to Paul Eluard, but I can't actually source it exactly, which goes like this. There is another world, and this is it. And if that's the case, then perhaps there the subterranean dwellers hold conferences discussing the fate of those who live on the planet above. Thank you very much.
Well, it turns out we are in the underworld discussing the underworld, so all is well. All mysteries are resolved. Briefly, we see Freud to some extent, and clearly Jung here, reaching into the depths of the psyche or the world, and encouraging us to bring up some things there, and this is transformative. It's not always clear to me what we look like when we've achieved that. Yeah. So if we do as Jung wants us to do, have this katabasis, what will the post-katabatic person look like? Yeah.
Interesting. Two things. One, on one level, you can't describe it what we look like, because otherwise you'd already be there. Okay, but I think that the answer in the case of Jung is maybe it looked like Jung himself, someone who is in touch with all his faculties and facilities and drives and coordinating them, bringing them together, because behind all this is a project to bring about totality, which is explicitly indexed by Nietzsche to the figure of Goethe. And remember that what Nietzsche says about Goethe is he disciplined himself into a totality. He became a whole. And we might talk about the fascinating katabatic references that are in Faust, one of these many epics of transformation, which I think would help illuminate where Jung stands in the German tradition that we were also talking about, but makes him fresh and relevant for us today as well.
I always thought Faust should be a good guy, not a bad guy. And I shall now add Jung and Goethe to my heroes. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.